Hi everybody, my name is Rebecca. I was scheduled to speak to you guys at Weekly Gathering. Obviously there's been a change in plans because of the weather, so we have this video for you guys. And since this is a video, I challenge you to take notes. You're able to pause this video at whatever point you need. So I have just been super encouraged lately to hear story after story from Kaylee and Scott about your guys' hearts for the Lord. I'm hearing stories about how this is a pivotal moment in your lives where you're choosing to surrender your full life to God. You're seeking biblical wisdom when it comes to navigating life, actively chasing after God, and I hope that you're experiencing the freedom and joy that comes with living a life with God. To me, it just feels like a full circle moment because it wasn't that long ago that I was in your guys' shoes. I started attending CRU back in 2020, which honestly wasn't the best time to start attending stuff, but that's besides the point. That was kind of out of our control. But yeah, I started attending CRU back in 2020 and I stayed through to the end of my senior year. And honestly, CRU was just a catalyst, not only in growing in my relationship with the Lord, but building me up into the ministry leader that I am today. And now being in the season of life, I can tell you guys with full confidence that living a life with God is just eternally better than literally anything else you could ever do in this life. But I do also want to acknowledge that it comes with its challenges. In fact, the New Testament gives us one of the first challenges when we become a new believer, which is raising our standard and really looking at our heart posture towards Christ. I want to share with you guys a verse found in John chapter 15, verses 1 through 2. So this verse says, "I am the vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful." I share this verse to set the tone for you guys today. For some of you guys, this topic may be a little bit difficult to hear, but I want to give you another challenge, and that is to fully embrace the difficulty. The New Testament tells us that our faith will produce fruit. If this is an area where the Lord is pruning you, he's doing it for a reason. So again, I challenge you to fully embrace the ways that God is transforming you, and not just the ways that feel good, but fully embrace it all. So that leads me to today's question, which is, what do I do if my best friends aren't Christian? When I look back on my life, starting in middle school all the way through college, I realized that one of the biggest things holding me back from fully surrendering my life to Christ was the people I was surrounding myself with. I have always been super concerned about the way that other people think of me, and this caused me to live a double life. In front of my non-Christian friends, I was the more laid-back Christian, but because I grew up in church around my Christian friends, I seemed like someone who was legitimately growing in my faith and having a personal relationship with God. And when it comes to God, you're either 100% in or 100% out. There's no in between. And this ultimately led me to choose my relationship with my friends or my relationship with God. I really wish I could give each of you a personalized answer of what to do in your situation, but unfortunately I can't. But thankfully, there is someone out there who knows exactly what you're going through and all the different nuances and things that I might not know. And that person's obviously God. Not only does he fully know and love you, but he also fully knows and loves your friend. So anything that we may not understand, God knows all of it. So today I'm going to share some practical steps with you guys on how to navigate, what to do when your friends aren't Christian. Those steps are to pray, share, evaluate, seek, and create boundaries. So on to the first step, which is to pray. And this might seem like a cliche Christian answer. Oh, of course, that's the first thing that you say is to pray. But no, seriously, guys, hear me out. The first thing you want to do is go to God in prayer. Sometimes I don't think that we realize the severity of how amazing it is that the creator of the universe gives us full access to communicate with him in prayer. Like I mentioned, God is the only one who knows everything about the situation. And in these difficult situations, we actually have an opportunity to grow closer with God in our relationship with him by confiding in him. And that's why I urge you guys to pray first. Seek God's wisdom. What is he leading you to do in this situation? Where do you need clarity when it comes to what to do with your friend? Another big thing is to ask him, in this situation, how can I be an ambassador for Christ? Another thing I've learned to do is to ask him to align your desires with his will. So as you approach this step, I ask you to take it seriously and fully be in his presence. Take away the distractions, put away the phone, put away the homework, put away your laptop, go to a private space, find a quiet area, maybe let your roommate know hey, I really need this time to be in prayer. If you don't mind, just being silent for a few minutes. One thing that my church has taught me to do is this thing in emotionally healthy spirituality. They challenge us to spend the first 5 minutes of our quiet time with Jesus in complete silence. So you may need your phone for that part to set a timer, and sometimes it can feel extremely excruciating to just sit there for the full 5 minutes. But what I've learned, and what other people will tell you that have done this, is that you'll very quickly realize how much we drown out God's voice with our thoughts. So I want you guys to just take the time to experience what it's like to fully be in his presence and really listening for what he's telling you. The next step is to share. One thing I do want to emphasize first is the order in which we're doing these steps. Seek the Lord first before we start sharing to a spiritual mentor or a discipler. When I usually go to a discipler first, they hit me with that question, have you prayed about this yet? And then I come to the realization that, I should have confided in the Lord first when it comes to this. So I do want to emphasize again, it's important to be praying first. And one thing I love about Cru is that you have this community here that really does care about you. For some of you guys, this is a really tough situation and it might come with some life-altering decisions. But you don't have to go through any of this alone. And as I share the next steps that come to navigating this topic, I want to let you guys know that you can be doing these steps with other people and checking in with other people about how these things are going. Don't ever feel like you have to shoulder this alone, because at the end of the day, you'll always have God, but you will have this community who loves and cares about you and wants to support you through this journey. And something that I learned too is when you seek the wisdom of someone who is spiritually mature or your discipler, they're going to bring a new perspective that you might not have noticed before. Now on to step 3, which is to evaluate. I'm never going to tell you up front, hey, you need to cut off all of your friends that aren't Christian. That is not what I'm saying. But also in this talk, I'm not going to be able to address every single specific experience that you guys have, which is why you just have to sit down and evaluate. Some of you might be ridiculed or made fun of for your beliefs. Others of you might have friends that are actually challenging your beliefs in a way to get you to stop believing in God, stop following him, and to actually conform to their beliefs. And for some of you guys, you might be starting to realize that being so close to this person is actually pulling you farther and farther away from Christ. I know for myself, I really experienced this, and I just become a completely different person when I'm around my non-Christian friends than when I'm actually with my friends who love the Lord. My biggest argument here is I don't think it matters how mature of a Christian you are. If these people can influence you to steer you away from Christ or even put a pause on speaking about Jesus when you're around them, those are not people that you need to be close with in your life. If these people are questioning you in a way to abandon your faith and not out of curiosity or wanting to learn more, those are also people that you don't need to keep close with you. I was always someone who would tell others, I can stand strong around these people. Like, I can stand my ground. I'm going to defend my faith. What I personally failed to realize was how detrimental this excuse would eventually become. I am a huge people pleaser, so I had that working against me. And ultimately, it all led back to prayer and asking God, what are you leading me to do? I was completely ignoring him in this situation when he was actively telling me, you need to put a distance between yourself and these people because they are keeping you further away from me, which leads me to the next step, which is to seek. I'm not gonna lie, I was never the most open person when it came to being friends with Christians. I always had a pretty negative mindset when it came to it, thinking that I don't really vibe with people my age that are Christians. Like, we don't typically have the same interests. And I really let my closed-mindedness keep me from experiencing authentic friendship. I really kept my guard up around other people. So if you're like me, or maybe you're in a similar spot where you just can't seem to let go of your old friends, and you think, I'm never gonna find any friends my age that are Christian, let me tell you, you will, and you're missing out on something so beautiful. So I'm going to read this part directly off of my notes because I truly want to tell you guys everything that I've gotten to experience in my Christ-centered friendship. So in my Christ-centered friendships, we both understand that we're equally and wonderfully made and that we're seated with Christ at his heavenly table. We understand that he has intentionally designed each of us and that we are made in his image, and that his plan for our lives are unique to the individual. And because of that, this has really eliminated any feelings of jealousy and bitterness, the need to compare, and the desires for unhealthy competition. In these friendships, I have someone to pray with or have a little Bible study with. They're able to offer fresh and new perspectives as we dive into scripture together. Another big thing is we serve one another. We are actively pushing each other towards Christ. And so one of the biggest things that this has helped with is eliminating some stumbling blocks that can occur, temptation, gossip, or holding grudges. And overall, it helps us not to live our lives in darkness. In some of the moments where I feel like I'm in the weeds and feeling like I'm just being dragged through the mud, they don't hesitate to sit in that with me. They take that time to grieve right alongside me and mourn with me. And they truly lift me up to God in these seasons. In moments of conflict, we're able to forgive and reconcile because we have experienced that perfect forgiveness and reconciliation with God. Christ has enabled us to resolve conflict in a way that is honoring to each other, gentle, loving, and seeking the wisdom from Scripture. And this has honestly made the very few instances of conflict with my friends get resolved so much more peacefully, and actually made some of my relationships so much more stronger. And lastly, my relationship with God has grown so much deeper as I see more and more of His goodness through my friends. I get to sit in awe of how intentionally, intimately, and wonderfully He has designed each of them, enabling them to fulfill their God-given purpose and live out their God-given identities. I'm able to witness His protection and provision at hand when they weather the storms of life, and I just get to marvel at the ways God shows up powerfully in their lives. I want you guys to raise your standards for friendship. It's also not enough for someone to just say that they're a Christian. Trade a superficial label for authenticity and seek a friendship with those who have a genuine desire to follow Jesus. You might have heard this phrase, equally yoked, and so I want to paint that picture for you. So this is going to be a little cheesy, but close your eyes and just picture this story. You're running a marathon. The first couple of miles, there's still a large crowd around you. You start to remember a couple faces that you're seeing next to you, but as you get into the next 5 miles, you notice that some of those faces are gone. As you get deeper into the race, people are starting to get tired and the number of people around you are starting to drop. But towards the end of the race, mile 25, you take a moment to look around you. You recognize a couple of the faces next to you, and these are people that have kept the same pace as you throughout the entire race. Encouraging them, you all finish the race together. Okay, you can open your eyes for this next part. This is one of the best pieces of advice I have ever received. Run so hard after Christ and don't stop chasing Him. And after a moment, take a look around and see who's still next to you. Those are the people that you want to keep close to you. These are the people who are running just as hard after Christ and are going to match pace with you. And what a beautiful thing it'll be to finish the race with them. And for this last step, I want you to take action. Based on what the Lord has revealed to you, how are you going to respond? It's very important that we create boundaries. And this will look like a number of things, but one example I'll go over is creating distance. A big thing I experienced was voicing to my friends that I no longer wanted to participate in drinking. I told them that getting drunk was just not something I wanted to be a part of. It was against my faith and ultimately hurting my relationship with Christ. And they were actually all very respectful of that decision. Everybody was like, yeah, good for you. We'll support that. Because of that response, I decided that it's okay to go out with them. I just won't be drinking and I'll be fine. But then when I would actually get there, I was so tempted to just have a drink because everybody around me was drinking. A few people would even politely ask, are you sure you don't just want one drink? Being in this environment, I ultimately fell into sin. I came to the realization that I wasn't able to stand my ground around these people. God had been calling me to put a distance in these relationships because He knew I was going to not be able to resist temptation and fall into sin. And so going back to that verse in John, I started to learn that this area of my life was bearing no fruit and it was time to cut off this branch. I want to tell you guys, in whatever boundary that you create, it's not enough to just flee from sin. And here's what I mean by that. We have to take it a step higher and actually flee from temptation. Many of us tend to think, as long as I don't engage in this, I'm fine. But we're allowing ourselves to get too technical here and teeter with the line of how close can I get to sin without actually sinning. In actuality, the Bible tells us to hate sin. And so we need to hate it so much that we're not going to put ourselves in an environment where we're even going to be tempted to fall into sin. And before I finish, there is a valid point that I want to address. Some of you may ask, well, aren't we supposed to be sharing the gospel with non-believers? Shouldn't I stay in this friendship in order to do that? I would say if that's what God is calling you to do, then yes, you should be obeying what the Lord is asking you to do. Except I'll bring back the example of what I experienced, where I was actually so dismissive of what God had made clear to me when it came to putting a distance in these friendships. I really deeply wrestled with him. I was telling God that there's no other Christians in my friend's life. I'm the only Christian in their life. So how else are they expected to learn about the gospel except through me? In reality, I wasn't trusting of God's plan for their life. I really thought that I knew better than him. He revealed that my heart was full of pride. I also wasn't willing to surrender the familiarity and the comfort that I found in these friendships. God is God, and we should fully trust him in the plans that he has for each and every one of our friends' lives. He fully knows and loves them, and he has a plan for them. And I want to read this quote. He reveals himself through scripture, creation, and Jesus. So instead of God needing us, he actually chooses to use us to share the gospel. But that choice is in his authority in his hands. So in the moment where he's laid down his authority and he said, it's not going to come from you, we need to let go and let God. And that's the quote, you know? And if you've never heard that quote, you're hearing it now. Let go and let God. So I want to thank you guys for giving me the space to share this message with you today. I know we weren't able to have a fireside chat today, but I do want to offer up my contact info to you guys in case that there's anything you want to get off your chest or you want to seek specific advice about. So feel free to contact Kaylee or Scott to get my number. Thank you guys again, and I hope you have a really blessed day.